to Claire.
Welcome everybody. As Felicia said, this is Crochet 102, so hopefully you're all in the right place. My name's Claire. I'm going to be hanging out in the chat with you there. I'll answer any questions in the Zoom chat, so if you've got those, please use that function rather than raising your hand. Just a reminder as well that we do ask that everybody is muted for the course of the class. If you've got questions, I'll take them from the chat and then forward them on to Darrin so he can demonstrate for us on screen. I'll also be putting the link to the handout and the pattern in the chat in case you need those again. And now that all of that's out of the way, we will finally let Darrin get started.
All right, welcome to class. Today is Crochet 102. So if you didn't get to see last week's class, which is Crochet 101, it is recorded and you can go back and rewatch that as a review. And this one will also be available, I think, tomorrow to watch again. So if you have questions, you want to follow up. Today, we're going to learn how to do half double crochet, double crochet, triple crochet. We're going to learn how to join a new ball of yarn so that we can change colors in a nice.
Hey, Darrin, your sound went out.
Oh, I was muted somehow. I'm sorry. So we're also going to learn about a little bit of seaming, and we're going to review a pattern on how to make this hat. So after class today, you will have all the skills you need to make a hat like this. And if I have time, I'm going to talk about how you can make a few changes to the pattern to make the hat maybe more suited to your personal style. And that's the best thing about making knitted or crocheted items is you can really, make things to suit your personal taste or your personal style. So today in class, I'm going to be demonstrating with this yarn. It's Hometown. Here's what the label looks like. Hometown Bonus Bundle. And the reason I'm using that in class is because it's a nice thick yarn and it's very smooth. And it's easy for the students to see what I'm doing. So it shows up much better on camera. So that's why I teach with that yarn and I'm using it in class. And the color I'm going to be using is this color, and this is Chicago Gray. And it has less glare. So I've, through some trial and error, I think that is a good choice. And then for the hat, so if you bought yarn to make the hat is recommending this yarn, which is Heartland. And it comes in a lot of really great colors. There's a lot of really good colors to choose from. This one is Sequoia, and this one is Dry Tortoise. So it recommends using two colors so that you can do the stripe. So that's why I'm using two different yarns. So if you only have one type of yarn, perfect, you'll be fine for practicing. So I just need to try to make things look as good as I can on camera. So, okay, so with all that being said, let's change the view to the view of my hands and we'll go ahead and get started. Let me move that pin. Okay. We also have an extra special guest with us today. Giselle is one of the teachers at Lion Brand, and she's going to be helping next week. She's teaching the class next week because I'll be traveling. So we're going to ask her for some of her opinions on some of the questions that come up as well. So if you hear a new voice, then it is our good friend Giselle.
Hello, I hope some of you will join us next week.
Okay.
It'll be the 28th to be exact, Crochet 103.
Okay, so whenever you're crocheting, you do want to make sure you have the right size hook with the right size yarn. It's very important. If you look at the side of your yarn, right here is a picture of the crochet hook. It is recommending an N13, which also translates to a 9mm. So there are different ways of looking at the yarn, at the crochet hook and how to describe the size of it. So of course, 9mm is millimeters are a scientific unit of measure, so that's a little bit more accurate. Sometimes the N, people will make your hooks and they might be slightly bigger or slightly smaller. So it's better to try to look at the millimeters to make sure you're getting the exact size that you want. So I don't usually use the millimeters because I grew up in America and the metric system is hard. So, but to be the most accurate, that would be your best choice. So, and I have these two hooks today. This one is a J and a 6mm for the project, and this 9mm by Lion Brand will be the one I'm using in class. And I'm going to show you a metal one as well. And all of the yarn in the hooks that I'm working with today are available on, well, the yarn's available on michaels.com or lionbrand.com. And then the hooks, I think, are just on Lion Brand. So to start out, I'm going to chain 10. Quickly. 8, 9, 10. And we did the chain last week. So here is my chain. I'm going to be working with 10 stitches. So I chained 10. So for a double crochet, however, for a half double crochet, I need to make 2 extra chains. So I'm going to have 12. So I chained 10 for my stitches. And then I have 2 extra chains, and those 2 extra chains are going to be turned up on their side like this, and they are going to become the side structure of my work. So whenever you're working in crochet, you do have to do, I call it chaining up, a certain number of stitches to create that side. So always remember to do that. And with half double crochet, you have to chain 2. Okay. So with half double crochet, the first thing you do is yarn over your hook. So you bring your yarn over your hook, and I have 2 loops of yarn on my hook. And I'm going to skip those first 2. So 1 and 2, I'm skipping. And then I'm going to go in the 3rd chain from the hook. So 1, 2, go in the 3rd chain from the hook, bring up a loop of yarn. And now I have 3 total loops on my hook. I have a total of 3. Yarn over, bring it through all 3. And that is a half double crochet. And I will demonstrate that several more times. So now that I've done my first one, I'm just going to do 1 in each chain across. So always start for half double, start with the yarn over, enter the next stitch, bring up a loop. Now I have 3 on my hook, yarn over. And when you bring this through, I'm going to pull this through all 3 loops. It's kind of helpful if you hold your work right under your hook and just gently pull it down. And what that does, it kind of opens up some space underneath your loops. Turn your hook so that the mouth of the hook is facing down, and just pull it through all 3. Sometimes you do kind of have to tease it through a little bit, but it's usually not so hard. I made my chain a little tight. Any questions about the half double? Don't make your chain so tight. I did talk about that last week, but whenever you're in your chain, always make sure you take an extra second and focus on keeping it loose, because a tight chain is a very common problem in crochet, and that will affect the way your final work looks as well. So, and it does make it easier to work into that chain. So any questions?
Do have a question. Tina wants to know, is it always skip 2 and go in the 3rd loop, or is that just for the first one, first row going into the chain?
So for half double, you do, and when you're doing your chain, you want to, and if you're following a pattern, the designer will have thought about this for you. The pattern will say chain 12, make your first half double in the 2nd chain from the hook, or I'm sorry, in the 3rd chain from the hook, meaning skip 2. And so that's the beginning. So the very first one, the very first row, which is the row you're working into your chain, you will be skipping 2 for half double crochet. But now that I've finished, so I finished my row, I finished all the way across, I'm going to chain 2, and this creates the side structure. So I'm chaining 2, and that creates the height. So it's bringing me up to the height that I need, and it's creating the side structure. And now I'm going to turn my work. And again, you kind of turn your work like you're turning the pages of a book. Don't get too caught up in that. It's not real important, but that's kind of how you turn it. And I'm not skipping any stitches now. I'm going to work right into that first stitch. So right into that first stitch. And if you want to look at the stitches and see how we're counting them, you look for this kind of V shape. Where you can kind of see it. So there, and that is 1 stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how you count your stitches. So the second row, I'm not going to skip any. You can kind of look at it as I'm skipping 2 because I did my chain 2, my chain up, chain 2. So you're skipping those, and then you're going straight in to the very first stitch. You're going under both of those strands of yarn. So for my half double, start with a yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over. I have 3 loops on my hook, pull it through all 3. And then as we're practicing and learning, it's very helpful to go ahead and pop a stitch marker on that first stitch. And then when you come back on the next row, you'll easily be able to find your last stitch. Okay, so yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, and then pull it through all 3. And you do want to kind of keep a light hand. You don't want to be pulling things tight. You want it to be kind of soft and squishy. We don't want it to be super loose, but do not get in the habit of pulling things really tight either. Okay, so what questions do we have? Is there any particular spot in the step that we're not seeing?
I think we had a little confusion in the first row going into the chain versus going into stitches. Some people remembered going under 2 pieces of yarn from the last class, but that's once we've got our first row of actual stitches done.
Yeah, so when you go into the chain, so the very first row, so you create your chain. I made my chain 10 to accommodate my 10 stitches. Then I did my chain 2 to create my side structure. And I skipped those 2 chains to go in the 3rd chain from the hook. And when you're entering the chain, there are 3 ways of entering the chain. The easiest way is to just go through the 1 strand of yarn. And that is the way I've been teaching for the beginning classes. So you just go under 1 strand of yarn when you're working into your chain. And then the second row, you're actually working into stitches. So these are actual stitches, and that's why I'm going under 2. I'm going under the 2. So there is a difference between working into a chain and working into stitches. So does that help clear that up?
I think so, yes.
I mean, I can go back and start over with the chain if we want to. So let me know what you want to do.
Just to clarify for everybody, we're working on row 2 now, correct?
Yes, I did my chain, I worked row 1, and now I'm finishing row 2. And I'm doing my last stitch, row 2. And I'm going to pause here for 1 second. Rid of that little string. I'm going to put a stitch marker on my last stitch. Now, this stitch marker marks my last stitch. This one marks my first stitch. And as you're learning, I strongly encourage you to use a stitch marker on each side so that you become very comfortable at identifying your first and last stitch, and you can start to see what the stitches look like and how they're shaped. It really does become very important. And so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10 stitches. It's very easy as you're learning to add a stitch by mistake or lose a stitch by mistake. And when I was learning how to crochet, for the longest time, I would do that. And then I would get very frustrated. My edges would go, I always said my edges looked like hedges because they were like all kinds of wavy and like angled and not pretty. So if you mark your edges with your first and last stitch with a stitch marker, it will help you learn to identify those stitches. And then later on, of course, you won't need them, although I still use them sometimes. If you're working with tiny yarn or very fuzzy yarn, it can help. All right, so I chained 2 to create my side height. Do we want to see half double again? Are we ready to move on to double, or what are we, how are we feeling?
I think we would like to start from the chain and show that first row of half double again.
Okay, so let me remove my stitch markers. And if you're having a problem making your chain very tight, you can go up 1 hook size. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. So 10 chains for my stitches. Now I'm going to do 2 extra chains to accommodate the side, and they will become the side structure. Okay. So that's my first. You don't count the one on your hook when you're counting your chain. I'm not going to count that active loop. I have 1, 2 chains right here. And then I'm going to skip those 2 and I'm going to go in the 3rd chain from the hook. And you'll hear people say that. They'll either say, skip the first 2 chains or enter the 3rd chain from the hook. That's saying the exact same thing. So sometimes people get confused because people will say things in different ways, but it means the same thing. So I'm skipping the first 2 chains, entering the 3rd chain from the hook. So you start with the yarn over, and I'm just going to go under 1 strand of yarn because that's the easiest way. And as we're learning, we want to keep things simple. No sense in over complicating things as we're learning. So yarn over, go into the next chain, bring up a loop, yarn over, go through all 3. Always start for half double, always start with the yarn over. Enter the chain under just 1. Does that help with the clarification? I'm going to put a stitch marker on my first one. Did that help answer that question though, or?
We've got at least 1 yes, so hopefully everyone
Okay,
else
good.
is getting it now.
Yeah, so the chain, working into the chain is a little different than working into your stitches, but it's pretty much the same. I think it's the hardest part, like doing your chain and working the first row. It seems like if once you do your chain and work the first row, everything's easier after that. So what do you think, Giselle? Do you like working into the chain, or do you go under 1 loop or 2 loops, or how do you do it?
Normally, if I'm doing a very basic foundation row, then yes, I'll just go under, or I'll go through the first loop so I could get a little more girth in that chain. I feel like if you go through the first 2, then I don't know, it feels a little flimsy. But I love going through the hump, what they call the little. I like that, but that's for a little later on.
Yeah, that little bump on the back of the chain. So whenever you make your chain, if you look at your chain closely and turn it upside down, there is a little bump on the bottom of the chain. If you go through that, what that does is it forces the 2 loops on the bottom, and it really makes the bottom look very similar to the top edge. And
Yeah, it
that's,
gives it a little give as well.
yeah. And well, if you're seaming it together, it's nice because it gives you a
Yeah.
nice place to sew into.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're making a scarf, it's nice because both edges look the same
Right.
as they're kind of viewed. So
Yes.
lots of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm going to do my chain 2 to create my side. Oops, okay. So I marked my last stitch and I marked my first stitch. I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to go into the second row. And I can clearly see my first stitch because I've marked it. And that marking that first stitch is not quite so important because usually it's very easy to find, but it does help you. You really want to learn how to read your work. You want to be able to look at your work and know what's happening. And because if you look at something that you did a couple days ago, you might have made a mistake or think maybe you made a mistake. So it's nice to be able to read your work and see what's happening. So I put a stitch marker on my first one.
I think that's really important too, Darrin, for the end, because even I sometimes get confused with which pattern or where I have to end in the turning chain. So where you're ending with your 10th stitch, I maybe would say, oh, wait, am I supposed to go into the top of that chain 2? So
Yes.
that's, yeah, but like you said, you need to learn to read your row and also know when it is that you're ending in a turning chain, which I'm sure you'll get into probably with double crochet, correct?
Nope, actually that's next week.
That'll be my turn.
That's next week.
Okay.
So yeah,
Very
the end stitch is really the most important one to mark because that one does tend to get confusing. And there are 2 different places you can enter that stitch. As Giselle was talking about, you can enter it the same way we're entering all other stitches. Sometimes you enter it in this turning chain, but we're not going to focus on that today. That's 2 separate ways of doing it. And when I was learning, somebody was showing me both ways at the same time, and I never could understand why I was losing stitches or gaining stitches. And it was because I was combining both methods and it was a big mess. So yeah, so I want everyone to practice this way first, and then next week, there'll be a little bit more learning about the next way of doing it. So let me finish this.
Before you finish this row, Darrin, can you just cover how many times you're yarning over and pulling through for a half double crochet again?
Yep. So with half double crochet, you start out with your active loop on your hook. So just 1 loop on the hook, yarn over. So you just bring your yarn over your hook 1 time. So now I have 2 loops on my hook. You enter the stitch. And so I'm going under both legs of this V, yarn over, bring up another loop. So at this point, I have 3 loops, 3 total loops on my hook. You yarn over, and then you bring that through all 3 loops. So yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, and then bring it through all 3. Always starting with the yarn over, 2 loops on the hook, enter your stitch, bring up a 3rd loop, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, bring it through. Does that help?
Yeah, that's better.
Now, with the yarn that I'm using today, it's a smooth yarn and it's a nice big yarn, so it's pretty easy to see what's happening. So if I were to lay my work out here, clearly you can see there's a little like shelf here, there's a little ledge. So obviously there's another stitch that I need to do, my last stitch. Easy. But if this wasn't here and I was working maybe a really loose with like really loose yarn or really fuzzy yarn, or if I was using tiny yarn, sometimes it could look, more like that. Whereas, maybe it's folded under, go ahead and fold it under. Maybe now that looks like, okay, I finished my row. Sometimes you'll be surprised it's not as obvious as this one is. So that's why I recommend the stitch marker, because 100% I'm sure I have 1 more stitch. There it is. I'm going to work that last stitch. And that really can help you avoid confusion as you're practicing. And then it's also, as you're practicing, I encourage you to just have like work with 10 stitches or 12, but not too many, because at the end of each row, you want to be able to count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good, I'm good. I counted my stitches. If you chain and have like 50 stitches and you're working across and then you count them and now you have 48, it's going to be hard to figure out where you made that mistake. And also I want you to have just a few stitches to work with, like 10 is a good number, because a lot of the learning is remembering to chain up 2, turn your work. So you'll get more practice in doing that, chaining up 2, turning my work, identifying that first stitch, which is usually pretty easy to identify. But again, if you're working with fuzzy yarn or something, you might be like, do I go in here? You know, there are places you can go that are incorrect. So if you're marking it, it's easy to find it. So any questions about finding those first and last stitches, counting stitches, anything at all? We should probably try to go on to double crochet if we're ready.
Yes, let's move on because we're already about halfway through class.
Well, once everybody feels comfortable with half double, we're just well on our way, because double is just a progression from half double. So it's pretty, it's all building on it. So with double, I'm going to chain up 3. So instead of 2, double is chain up 3. So if I were starting with double, instead of 12 stitches, I would have started with 13. So you need 3 extra stitches for double. And again, your pattern will have figured this out for you. So if you're making a scarf or a hat and the pattern instructs you to chain 10 or 12 or whatever, that's the correct number. And then they'll tell you what to do, which chain to work into first. So for double, you yarn over. So it starts out the same. You go into that first stitch, bring up a loop. So it starts, it's working pretty much the same. Yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2. And I'll do that again to show you several times. So just as a reminder to help us contrast the difference, half double, yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, pull it through all 3. That's half double. And then double, yarn over, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, and then here's where it's different. Yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2. And I always think of when I'm bringing it through 2, I always think of that as my crochet. I don't know if that's, but because I'm doing 2, I'm bringing it through 2, and then I'm bringing it through 2. So that's my double. Does that make sense to you, Claire or Giselle? Like, is that? But that helps me remember I'm doing double. I need to bring it through 2, bring it through 2. I need to do it twice.
Right. Yes, exactly. Double crochet is doing the motion double. Twice. Yep.
And then in triple, which we haven't got to yet, you do it 3 times. So it just kind of makes sense to me that way. So, but any questions about double? How do we feel about double? It's a taller stitch. Yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2. How do we feel? Any questions really about anything we've covered yet? See, but once you've mastered half doubles, then it's very easy to do the double. Bring it through 2, bring it through 2. Okay, what questions do we have? No questions? Don't be afraid to ask questions.
We do have a question to repeat what you said about the chains. I think it might have been towards the beginning of this row, and I'm not exactly sure what she's referring to.
Okay, well, let's look at it. So we're at the end of the row. We're working double. The next row will be double. So it really, what's really important is what is the next row you're doing. So the next row we're doing is double. So for double, because it's a taller stitch, I'm going to chain 3. So chain 3, I need 3 stitches. I'm sorry, I need 3 chains to create that height. Turn your work, so I'm turning my work. And then I'm going to go into that very first stitch. I didn't adjust my stitch marker, but that's okay. So yarn over. There's my 3 chains for my side structure. Enter the stitch, bring up a loop, bring it through 2, bring it through 2. Does that answer that question? What else can I do to help? Was that it? So for half double, you do a chain 2 on the turning chain, and in double you chain 3. So there is a difference.
Yes, that cleared it all up.
Okay, perfect.
Follow-up question. Even though you're chaining more, you're still going to have the same number of stitches per row?
Yes, because that chain, remember, all that chain is doing is it's just creating the side height, or I've been using the word structure, the side structure, because it's not adding a stitch, it's just bringing up. If we didn't do that, let me just go ahead and not do it. So I'm going to finish my last stitch on this row. So chain 2, turn my work, and this is incorrect, so don't focus on this. I'm going to do my double crochet. I did not chain up, which is 100% wrong. And do a couple more so then we'll look at it. Because that doesn't add a stitch, that just creates that side edge.
Right, and maybe what you could also, once you're counting the stitches, you don't count the chain 3 as a stitch, which could be confusing too when you're counting the V's at the top or the actual posts. So it's a little easier when there's double crochets to maybe count the actual posts because they're a little bigger and they're a little more visual. So I used to get confused all the time too, because with double crochets, I would count and some patterns do call for the chain 3 to be counted as a stitch, but in this case, they are not. So you should only be counting the actual double crochets that you're putting into each stitch. And then in your case, there should be 10.
So when Giselle was talking about the post, this is your post right here. So the different ways you can count your stitches, you can count the post. So 1, and then this is 1 here. That's a post. And here's a post. Or you can count the V's at the top. So whatever method you like. Sometimes you can count these holes, but usually I count the post or the V's at the top. But on this example here, when I did not do my chain 3, you can see it causes it to kind of curve in, and it doesn't give me a nice edge. So the chain 3 in this technique that we're doing today, the chain 3 only creates the side edge. So, and then that's what we're focusing on this week. But one of the beautiful things about crochet is there's always something else to learn. And so sometimes in other situations, this could count as a stitch. Sometimes it does, but that is for next week's class. So and that's the beautiful thing about crochet. You can always, you think you've learned everything. Well, you haven't. I can tell you haven't learned. There's always more to learn with it. So we're going to focus on, we can do double again. Do we have questions about half double, double? What are we thinking? What do you think, Claire? Should we go on to triple, or we want to see double again?
Looks like we have a request one more time for double. And we've got just about 25 minutes left in class to give you a time check.
1, 2, 3. Okay, so double. Chain 3 to create that side edge. Yarn over. Enter the stitch. Bring up a loop. So now I have 3 loops on my hook. And if this looks exactly like a half double, so at this point, I could pull it through all 3 and do a half double, or I can do a double. And so this case, I'm going to do a double. So yarn over, bring it through 2, yarn over, bring it through 2. Starting with my yarn over, enter the stitch going under both legs of that V, bring up a loop. So I have 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, bring it through 2. Now I have 2 loops on my hook, yarn over, bring it through 2. Now I have 1 loop, it's just my working loop. So yarn over, bring it through 2, bring it through 2. How do we feel? What if I yarn over twice? What's that going to do? So yarn over twice, bring it through 2, bring it through 2, bring it through 2. Oh my goodness. Look how tall that stitch is. That might be a triple. Maybe I snuck a triple in there when nobody was looking. So for triple, yarn over twice. Yarn over twice, enter the stitch, bring up a loop, yarn over, bring it through 2, bring it through 2, bring it through 2. So you bring it through 2 3 times. And I feel like that's what makes it a triple. I'm not sure why people name stitches things that they name them, but so yarn over twice, enter the stitch, bring it through 2, bring it through 2, bring it through 2. But once you start practicing your half double and then go to double and then go to triple, it really makes logical sense the way each stitch kind of builds on the previous stitch to create a taller stitch. So this one is very tall. So yarn over twice, through, go through 2, 2, go through 2, yarn over twice, enter the stitch, bring up a loop. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 on my hook, come through 2, so I have 3, yarn over, come through 2, now I have 2, yarn over, come through 2, and now I'm down to just my working loop. Okay. Any questions really about anything we've covered so far?
Since you didn't start the row with the triple, just mention how many turning chains you would need if you wanted to start a row with triple.
Almost there. So let's turn, finish R. I started that right. So yarn over twice. You do have to pay attention, but I do anyway. What I'm doing, I can't. So go through 2, go through 2, go through 2. Okay. Now you can see this is a very tall stitch. I did a couple double to start with, and you can see I made these a little looser because I was demonstrating, but you can see there is a definite increase in the height from double to triple. So when we do our chain up, we're going to chain up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and that creates the side edge. So that creates that side edge. Turn your work. Yarn over twice for triple. Enter the stitch. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So yarn over, bring through 2. 1, 2, 3. Yarn over, bring through 2. yarn over, bring through 2. And that is a triple. Any questions? You want to see how to change a color at the end of this row? If you wanted to change to a new color?
We do have a question from Lori. When you go under the chain stitch, there is another thread in the post hole. Do you catch that one as well, or just the chain?
Well, so do you mean the chain all the way down here when we first started? Is that what we're talking about, the very first chain? Or are we?
That I read the question as it was typed, so I'm not sure.
Okay, so as we're working this row here, all we're doing is we're going through this hole, and
I
you can
think maybe
see
she means that other piece of yarn below your finger there.
right there. Yeah, we don't
Yeah.
go under all of it. I mean, there's certain situations when you could, but for the most part, for what we're doing today and for the standard practice, we're just going under these 2. So when I've said before, just 2 strands, we don't want to go through because now we're under 3. And if you did that, it's not going to be the end of the world. You've probably endured worse in your life, right? But see, it still works out as a stitch. But what happens is if you do it all the time consistently, it wouldn't be so bad, but it does open this window here up a little bit more. And you can see there is a difference between this stitch and this one. So there is a difference. And so traditionally, and the basic way is to just go under just the 2. Giselle, was there ever a time when you go under all of those? I don't know of a stitch that you do that.
Only when you chain to make up a hole, an actual hole. So like when you're doing a couple double crochets or whatnot, and then you're making little like windows, and then you chain
And you'd go under
2,
all
for
of it.
example. Yes. And then on the next row, when you're going up, you need to actually crochet on top of those chains. You know what I mean? So it's not a, so there wouldn't really be like a V situation there, but
Okay.
yeah, I know that might kind of
So
confusing
that's for
myself.
another day then.
Yeah. But in
so
in these very traditional rows, yeah, I never go underneath all of that that sort of post. No, because I also don't like my work being too open either.
Yeah, that does open it up. I've actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I've actually done that by mistake when I wasn't paying attention.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it does open up a little, it looks different. It does look different.
And it's easier to do it with the lighter weight yarns, to your points, and fuzzy yarns and things like that.
And there is a stitch, just for fun, I'm just going to pretend, I'm going to show you. There is a stitch where I've only picked that up, and that turns everything on its side and kind of creates a different effect on the front of your work. So there's always this situation. I mean, anything you think of that you might be doing wrong, in a different situation, it's probably an actual stitch you could use. So.
And to your point, Darrin, about there always being something that you can learn once you get these basic single, half double, and double crochet stitches down. You can do anything. You could cable with crochet. You can do so many things. So these are just the building blocks, and it just never gets old.
No. All right, so I did my row of triple. So I'm going to go back to doing half double. So I'm going to chain 2 for half double.
Did we want to show how to change color at the end of this row?
That's what,
okay.
I was confusing myself again, which happens frequently in these classes. All right, so I'm going to do a triple, but I'm going to change color for the next row. So I'm going to yarn over twice for my triple. And I'm going to go through 2, go through 2. And if I were just finishing my row and not changing colors. For the triple, I would go through 2. But because I'm changing colors, that very last step, I'm going to do that with this new color. So I'm just going to put that new color, just rest it on my hook, leaving enough of a tail for finishing. And I'm just going to pull that through 2. And then I'm going to do my chain 2 because I'm going to do half double. And you can see that gave me a nice, clean stripe. So let me do a couple more so we can kind of see what we're doing, see how it looks. I'm going to quickly finish this row so we can see what it looks like. Are there any questions, though, while I'm going across here quickly? Because I want you guys to see. I'm going to do it wrong to show you how it looks if it's not done correctly. So I'm just working my half double across quickly. And so here's a situation where I didn't put my stitch marker. Is this a stitch? Is that the stitch? Should I go in here? You know, sometimes it's confusing, but I know I can look at this and be like, that's my turning chain. So my last stitch was here. But sometimes it can be confusing. So I'm going to change colors again. Let me find my scissor. I'm going to go back to the gray. So I'm going to do it wrong to show you the difference. So I'm going to finish my half double. I finished it all the way, which is incorrect. And now I'm going to chain 2. So just all you do to add the next colors, you just lay it over your hook and then pull it through your loop, chain 2. And I'm going to do a couple of stitches and then we're going to look and see what happens, how it looks. So you can see on this side, let's see if it shows up nicely, that it's a pretty clean stripe right here. But over here, you can see this green, there's a loop that goes completely up into the gray. So to avoid that, and see over here, it doesn't look quite as bad. It looks, no, you're never going to get 100% of clean stripe because it's soft yarn and kind of fuzzy, but you can see how this green, if we can kind of get a contrast. Let me finish the row. That might help look a little better. So any questions? Sometimes I'm just not sure if things are showing up on camera clearly.
It is pretty amazing how that clean finish just makes everything look so polished versus completing the row and attaching the color one step further. So yeah, it's pretty important to just know how to do that.
So see here, you can see it's a much cleaner stripe, whereas here, this loop where we started, this green goes clear up. So that's going to be the main difference. So any questions about that? How to do that?
What happens to all the tails that you've created now?
Well, that's a whole other problem, right? What you're going to have to do with the tails is you get a large-eyed blunt needle. So it's a needle, it's not sharp because you're not piercing the strands of yarn, you're going in between them. And you want a large enough eye to fit your yarn through. So this is very bulky yarn, so you want to go through. Oh, you don't want to split it. One thing you can do is you can get a piece of paper. I'm going to trim this a bit off. You can wrap this. My mother taught me this. It's very clever.
Ooh, I love that, Darrin. I learned
And then
something
you
new
just
today.
go through. Sometimes it's very fuzzy. And if the needle is maybe the eye is not as big as it could be, but this makes it easier. And then you want to weave in your ends, and you want to weave in each color on the proper color. So you would weave in the green on this green. And crochet stitches are 3-dimensional. So you can bury these ends in the middle of your stitch. So you want to make sure you're not doing anything that changes the way your stitches look. So you can see how I'm going under. I'm just going under these stitches here. All right, and what you want to do is look at the other side and make sure you're not affecting the way it looks. And because you can't see my needle, what that means is the needle is buried inside the stitches. So when I pull my yarn through, the yarn is going to be inside the stitches, and it's not going to change the way my fabric looks. And then you want to go one way about 3 inches, 2 to 3 inches, and then back. So I'm just going to go in between the stitches. I'm just going to be burying them in the middle. Check the other side. Whoops, see how that, so if I pull my yarn through, you're going to see a strand of yarn crossing that, which is not going to look nice. So you want to check and make sure your needle is indeed going in between the stitches and not kind of just behind them. So carefully, I'm just kind of going in between. Looks good on this side. And then I'm pulling it through. And I know there's a lot of ways to do this, and people sometimes get very fussy about what you want to do is you want to make sure that the ends are woven in secure. And I could have left a longer end. You really want, like this is too short. You want to go about 3 to 4 inches one way. You want to go up to the next row and then go back. So going back in that opposite direction really helps to lock it in place. You want to make sure that you're not affecting the way that your work looks, that you're not changing the way that your stitches are shaped. You don't want to, if you tend to pull it too tight by mistake, you can kind of massage it out a little bit. I've seen people do it in a diagonal line, and it tends to show. I like to look and see which way my fabric is moving, and this kind of looks like it's going in horizontal stripes. So I would go horizontally with that. So any questions about weaving in the ends? You don't want to tie a knot. Some people will just tie a knot and be done with it. Knots do come untied and your work will unravel. I've repaired so many things over the years for people that have had that happen. Knots don't look professional, and they do leave an unsightly bump that you can feel. So if you want to, if you're going to put these in your Etsy store and you're going to, retire early and sell crocheted hats online, you want them to look as nice as possible. So that's why I recommend that. Any questions about anything we've done so far? We just have a few minutes left. We have about 6 minutes left. We want to look at the pattern.
Yes, I know we have several people who are excited to see the pattern. And just a reminder that if we do end up going a little bit over, or if you need to see something like the color changing again, that this class is being recorded. And so you'll be able to watch it again in about 24 to 48 hours on the Michael's YouTube channel.
So this is a free pattern. You can go to lionbrand.com. You can either type in this number, or it's just called Crochet Level 2 Striped Hat. It's a free pattern. It tells you what you need, like a recipe. Lion Brand Heartland yarn. The original hat was made in Yellowstone and Yosemite. So you need 1 ball of each, but you can certainly choose whatever color you like. And again, lionbrand.com or michaels.com. There's so many great colors. Crochet hook size is a J10, which is what we're going to use. And then we need large-eyed blunt needles. It gives you a little, we're not going to worry about gauge. Gauge becomes very important later on when you're making larger projects. But for something like a hat, you don't have to get caught up and worry about gauge too much. If your hat is very loose and flimsy, you might want to go down a crochet hook. If your fabric is very stiff and very dense, you can go up a crochet hook, 1 or 2 sizes, whatever it is to make your hat feel better. So that's pretty much all you need to know about gauge so far. There's some basic notes about the hat. The hat is worked in one piece, and then it's sewn together. So we're just going to look at the pattern. We're going to jump right into the pattern. Okay. So I made some notes on this because I actually changed my design. I went down to a 4mm hook because I wanted a more dense fabric. So I noted that on my pattern in case I want to do it again. And I made a hat that was larger and more slouchy. So I changed 45. So I made those notes on my pattern in case if I want to do it again. But for your first try, I recommend following the pattern. So with color A, and you can decide what your color A is going to be, chain 33. Now that's pretty easy. Row 1, continuing with color A, we're going to double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. So we're going to skip 3 and double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. The 3 skipped chains do not count as a stitch. So it's making that very clear for us right up front. So we're going to double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook, and in each chain across, you will have 30 double crochets. And this is a very good time to stop and count and make sure you do have 30. And I recommend putting a stitch marker on your first and last stitch to help you keep a good count. So with color A, you're going to chain 3. It does not count as a stitch. Turn, double crochet in each stitch across, and then you're going to change to color B in the last step of the last stitch, the way that I showed you how to do it. Now this hat is a great time to practice that, because if you don't do it right, and if you're unable to understand how to do it, and you don't get a clean edge along here, what's going to happen is this edge is going to be gathered up to make the top of the hat. So it's not going to show. So this is a great opportunity to practice it, make mistakes, just do crazy things, because it's going to hide. But by the time you finish the hat, you should have a pretty good understanding of what it's trying to tell. So, try it a couple of different ways until you understand exactly the correct. So now we're going to go to rows 3 and 4. Continuing with color, okay, no, now we're changing to color B. So 3 and 4, we've changed to color B. Chain 2. So that's new. That's not what we were doing before. So chain 2 does not count as a stitch. Turn. Now we're going to half double in each stitch across. We're going to change to A in the last row of 4. So it's giving us 3 and 4 together. So we're going to work 1 row with color B. We're going to go back, work the 2nd row with color B, and then we're going to change back to color A in that last stitch, giving ourselves a nice clean stripe. We're going to give it our best try. And then rows 5 and 6, we're going with color A. This time we're going to chain 1. Okay, so that's different. So it does not count as a stitch. Turn. Now we're going to single crochet. So that's why we were chaining 1. So we're going to single crochet across 7 and 8. We're back to B, 9 and 10. We're back to A. So we're just going to follow each one. And then once we finish row 10, it wants us to repeat rows 3 through 10 until the piece measures about 19 inches. So if you know that you have a super big head and you can never get a hat to fit, maybe you want to go 20 inches. This is where you can make some decisions. If you have super thick hair, maybe you want to go 21 inches. If you're making this for a child, maybe you want to go 16 inches. So these are the decisions you can make. Then you're going to fasten off, cut your yarn, leaving a long tail. So you're going to leave a very long tail because that tail is going to be used for finishing. Okay, so quickly I want to show you how to finish. So when I changed colors on mine, I did not cut my yarn. I just carried the colors up the side and it creates this edge. And because we're going to hide this in the top of the hat, it doesn't make any difference. But if that were on the edge of a scarf, that wouldn't bother me. It would bother other people and other people wouldn't want to do it. But you can decide how you feel about it. So I'm going to take my large eye blunt needle and I'm going to put my long tail through it. And then all you do at the top is, when you do leave the yarn on the needle for the whole time, you rethread it. So all you do on the top is you just go in and out. So you're just going kind of like a zigzag. Try not to get your yarn in a knot like I just did. So you're just kind of going back and forth. It's nice if you kind of keep it kind of even. So you can see I'm just going up and then back down. But if you do it uneven and you're not being super careful, it's not the end of the world. And then just kind of pull it through as you go. This is a very forgiving technique, so you don't have to be, you should enjoy it. You don't have to be stressed out. So see, I'm just kind of going up and down, zigzagging across, and then just pulling it through as I need to. And then what's going to happen when I pull this tight, it's going to gather it up. It's going to cinch it up into, and then pull it closed. And then you want to kind of go back through the beginning and kind of sew those together. So the very first row and the last row, you want to sew them together. You might want to go through it a second time and pull it tight so that it doesn't come, you don't want it to open up and have a hole in the top of your hat. Eventually you want to make sure it's nice. All right, so we've closed up the top. We've hidden any mistakes we made during our color changes. And now we're going to seam the side. And it's nice if you have some kind of clips or something to clip your fabric together so that when you're sewing it, things work out nice for you. Otherwise, you're sewing, everything. You're having a great time. It looks beautiful. And then when you get to the end, it's like that. It's like, how could one end be longer than the other one? When I made it, it wasn't like that. That's crazy. What happened? The problem is crochet fabric is very stretchy, and sometimes, that happens. So in order to help prevent that from happening, you put these clips to hold it in place. And then when you come to a clip, you double check and make sure everything's still good. So the way I like to seam is I'll hold my work like this. I got my one seam, I got the other seam. I like to hold my finger between the seams like this so I can kind of keep track of where I am and make sure everything stays nice and even. And then try to keep this really simple. A lot of people get very afraid of seaming. You don't have to be a seamstress to do this. So I'm going back through. All I'm doing is I'm just picking up two strands of yarn. I'm not going deep. And then move to the next. See, picking up two strands of yarn. I'm just going back, and this is a running stitch or a basting stitch. Let me see if I can find it. If I were crocheting more on this hat and I was going to crochet, I would go right under here. This is where I would crochet. And so I'm going to use each one of these stitches to help guide my sewing. This side is my chain, and it's not quite as easy to see, but you can see right here, right there, you can find your chain there. And so I'm going to use those, and that's going to help me keep my stitches spaced out the same distance and going the same depth. And if your stitches are spaced out the same distance and always the same depth, you're going to have a pretty nice seam. And so you can use those as a guide. Okay. And this is the running stitch, which is the stitch I like. But you can also do a whip stitch. So for the running stitch, you can see my needle exited the fabric on this side. I'm going back through the same side. It exits on the other side. So I'm kind of going back and forth. With the whip stitch, you're always entering the fabric from the same side. So I'm taking it over my seam, but I'm still keeping my stitches the same depth. Bring it back over the seam. I'm using my crochet stitches in my chain to help guide me. So you can see the difference is with the whip stitch, you're jumping over your seam and you're always entering the fabric from the same side, and you're always exiting from the same side. I like the running stitch. Other people like the whip stitch. I don't think we should fight about it. I think everyone should just use the one they like. Which one do you like, Giselle?
I'm seaming up a sweater now using the whip stitch, which I love, but I also like this one when we're doing two different colors. So as you can see with the whip stitch, you see the light color on the dark. So if you use your running stitch, then it hides a little
Yeah.
better. Mhm.
So some people have very strong opinions about these stitches and they'll fight you, but I don't think we should fight. So,
No, 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 never.
what do you think, Claire? Which one do you like better?
I don't usually make crochet projects that require seaming, but I think I probably prefer the running stitch.
Okay. Any
Actually,
questions?
I'm making a blanket in panels right now, and I think I might slip stitch it together, which is a different thing altogether.
Different thing. Oh, that's another day, Claire. It's another day.
She
Yeah,
likes to
I did
throw.
it wrong, so it's easy.
Yeah.
So here's the thing: if you finish your seam and you look at it and you're like, "That looks awful. I'm embarrassed to wear this hat," then all you have to do is carefully go back, and you can see how easy it is to take the seam out and give it another try. And if you get over anxious and you tend to pull it really tight and now your fabric is bunched up, you can just gently kind of massage it out. And if you need to, just one at a time, take those stitches out and give it another try. Knitted and crocheted fabric are very forgiving. And like if you're sewing with satin or silk and you make a mistake, then and you take it out, you've kind of ruined everything. But this fabric, you do not have to worry. So see how easy it is, just take it out and give it another go. Okay. Any questions about anything we've covered today, really? We're pretty much, I think we've gone over, but.
Yes, I was going to say we're almost 10 minutes over now. So if you had anything else you wanted to cover, I would say, and I don't know if you mentioned it, when you're seaming like this, you're going to flip the hat basically right side out. So your seam's going to go out the inside. So if it does end up a little messy, you're not going to see that anyway.
Yeah, I was working on the inside. When you're done, you turn it this way, and then you can put a pom-pom on top. You can do whatever you want. Excuse me. All right, if you do run into questions, when you start practicing, that's when you'll have the question. You can contact me on social media. You can contact my Instagram. It's Mr. Woolly Bear. Maybe Claire will put that in the chat for everyone to see. It's M-I-S-T-E-R, Woolly Bear spelled out. Or on Facebook, you can send it to my name. It's just Darrin Morris, just my picture's there, you'll clearly see it. Send me a direct message on either of those two platforms, and I don't get many, so I don't mind it at all. And then I can help you if you get kind of stuck or get kind of confused. And if you make something, I'd love to see it so you can tag me in it. So just for an example, I made this is the same hat following the same pattern, except I did the whole thing in half double. I changed 45 instead of 33. I did the whole thing in half double. I ran out of yarn, so I finished this one little section in black, which I think looks cute. And now it's an original design. And if you do something like this, you have become a crochet designer, right? So you can chain 50 and do yours in double, and now you're a crochet designer. So you've made it, right? And then this one, I followed the pattern pretty much, but this one I did the different colors, but I did double. I didn't do all of the different stitches it wanted to do. And I don't like to be told what to do. I barely take suggestions. So I always want to make changes and make something to be my own. So there you have it. Anything else? We better cut this quick. So better cut it off. All right. Thanks for coming to class. Let me know if you have any questions. So don't forget to practice, practice, practice. That's when the learning happens.